I tell people, don't give up before you get your miracle. I've never had anybody get to the end and not get their miracle. So it's free. And I think most of the other women I've worked with, it helps them be the person that God made them to be because they're not weighed down with the enemy's condemnation and bitterness and the things like that that he would have us hold on to.
Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe, where we pour positive back into your day, sharing stories from real people who have made it through some real struggles, but were able to restore their health, hope, and peace. I'm Lisa Roers, your host, and as a certified coach, I'm here to guide you to be your best self-advocate, to help you restore your health, ignite your faith, and conquer those fears while you navigate your own healing journey so you can eventually exchange your dis-ease for durability. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hey friends, and welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. We are just days now before Thanksgiving here in the United States. A beautiful holiday where we often will gather with our family and friends, enjoy a meal together, maybe watch some football, or just make some good memories together. But Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, these family holidays are also holidays that can bring up a lot of really challenging memories and even difficult emotions from earlier years, memories that are sometimes really painful and even traumatic. It might be just dealing with the loss of a family member who is no longer sitting at the table with us, or it's navigating different opinions and political views that are so difficult to bring to the table. So the season of gathering can really trigger those emotions in us that make us turn to other things for comfort. Things like food, sugar, sweets, alcohol, smoking, drugs, shopping, or gambling. Everyone has something they struggle with, and some things are more destructive than others. But if the holidays make you cringe more than you jump for joy, well, I think you're in good company. My friend and our guest this week has some really encouraging words for you and for anybody dealing with that kind of hurt, hang-up, or habit that might be stealing your joy. Julie Bonham Howard is an author and a speaker, and also the founder of the media ministry called A Love Like His. She's also a ministry leader for one of the largest Celebrate Recovery programs in the United States. If you're not familiar with Celebrate Recovery, it is an amazing program. It's a Christ-honoring, biblically based 12-step program which has helped tens of thousands of people reclaim their lives and break free from the addictions, the hurts, the hangups, or the habits that were holding them back. Julie's recovery journey over the past 8 years has really given her an authentic heart for those who are struggling with addiction and for the people who love them. She has been a sponsor to dozens of women dealing with codependency, for example, and she's also trained a multitude of men and women to be sponsors and group leaders for Celebrate Recovery Ministries. She's also a mother to 10 amazing adult children and has personally experienced the heartbreak and destruction addiction can bring. But on the flip side, thankfully, she's enjoyed the miraculous restoration that recovery offers to those who choose it as well. So let's dive into this conversation with Julie Bonham Howard. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I am Lisa Roers, your host, and just looking forward to sharing this conversation with you today. My guest is Julie Howard. She's a beautiful soul. You're going to learn so much from her and be really inspired by all the amazing things that she's doing out in the world to help people in the area of recovery. So, Julie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to get to share.
Good. We had a chance to talk. You're just such an easy person to talk to. I think this particular podcast episode could go for a lot longer than we might want it to do. So we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. But there's so many things about your bio that are just really intriguing, from having 10 amazing adult children to all the things that you've done with Celebrate Recovery and the speaking that you do to help other people who are on their path or journey for recovery. One of the quotes that really stuck out to me was how you had said an addiction leaves a wake of heartbreak, destruction, and thank God restoration. Let's
Mm.
start there. I know you've had your own journey of addiction and recovery. I know that's kind of a heartbreaking story. I did get your permission before we spoke about
Right,
asking you to
right.
speak on that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and that'll help us understand how you got into this field.
Okay, absolutely. So, Celebrate Recovery is really for any hurt, habit, or hangup. It's not necessarily just drug addiction or alcohol addiction. It's for any hurt, habit, or hangup. And I found myself um, for it was actually the second time. The first time, I went and left and didn't think they had anything for me. And then I came back a little while later on a Friday night, and I had a very real plan to kill myself Sunday morning.
Oh, no.
And, God had been speaking to me and telling me he wanted me to go that night, and I was just in this very dark place, and I said, "Okay, but it's the last thing I'm gonna do for you." And so when I got there, God met me there, and I'm sure everybody that was there got something out of the lesson that night, but I felt like it was talking directly to me, and so I repented of that and, went down and laid the things that had gotten me there at the altar and began my recovery journey.
Mm,
And having 10 children, all of them adopted from foster care, um, I had been very much trying, thinking I was doing that in God's power, thinking that I was doing that, with Him. But truth be told, I was trying to do it in my own power, and I had just gotten to the point where um, I I couldn't, my power was spent. And as they came into adulthood, and I thought that if I was a good enough mother, if I was a good enough advocate, if I was, if I got them enough services and that sort of thing, I could save them from their trauma, from their genetics, from everything. And so when they got into adulthood and started getting into some trouble and going away other ways than what I wanted for them, I really struggled with that. And that led me to a depression that led me to that day.
mm,
So I had walked in and repented and started my recovery journey and really started working on my mental health and truly giving it to God. I had been in church my entire life and I had been told to lean on Jesus and count on Him. But it wasn't until I got into the 12 steps and into recovery where it truly taught me how to do that. Like I had the head knowledge, I knew what I was supposed to do, but the 12 steps is where it's really like a great discipleship program because it really taught me to take the head knowledge and turn it into heart knowledge. And then it affected my actions and all of that. So anyway, so I worked recovery for my mental health and my codependency for a couple of years. And one of my daughters wound up in active addiction to methamphetamine. And so she was full blown homeless, living in an abandoned house in a terrible neighborhood, pregnant. Shortly after, I had gotten a call that she had passed out in a gas station because she was malnourished. And then just a couple weeks later, found out she was pregnant. So um, it was some really difficult times. And the recovery that I had been working, the great thing about Celebrate Recovery is someone like me, I've never really had a struggle with drugs or alcohol. My struggle was more with mental health and codependency, but we recover right alongside people with those addiction issues. And
mm,
so I had those resources when she went into addiction, and I had that support team set up that really helped me manage all of that
right.
in the way that glorified God. And fortunately, she only stayed in addiction for a couple of years. I know there are a lot of people that story lasts for decades, but for me, it was just a couple of years. But she is now clean.
Mm,
She's 4.5 years clean. She's got 3 kids. She's married to, the guy that she was living with at the time. They got clean together, which is,
oh,
kind of unusual that the couple both get clean, but they got clean together, and now she's working with me in the ministry.
wow.
Yeah, so now.
Restoration. That's a huge
Right,
redemption and restoration.
right, absolutely, absolutely. So Um, it was something that, nearly took me out a couple years before, but it's made me stronger. It's given me my first purpose in life, I think, was to be a foster parent, but as that season came to a close, I believe this was God's second calling on my life to work with people with mental health issues and people who love, addicted adults. So,
Mhm. Absolutely.
um, and managing all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I, I'm always amazed by the way that God takes our stories when we can't understand why we're walking a particular path, and He takes those stories and uses what we learn from that journey to turn and help another person. Because if you hadn't had that support structure and the 12-step experience of your own healing, you would not have been as equipped to help your daughter in those moments.
Right.
That,
Absolutely.
that's
Right.
beautiful.
Yeah, I really thought at that time, it was over. I was coming out of another church. I had, had a lot of church hurt and had come out of that church and just came to this church, and I I really thought God had abandoned me, but he was
Mm.
really just moving me where he knew I was gonna need to be, a couple years down the line. So he was working all of that together for my good and his glory. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
praise God. I'm so very grateful, my friend, that God pulled you out of that depression. And so very grateful that
absolutely.
He has restored your daughter and her husband now and has given them this ministry. And how much more powerful is it to come alongside someone and say, I want to help you. And by the way, I've been there. It's such a
Absolutely.
more powerful stance to come from versus, I have no idea what you're going through, but I'm here and I love
Right.
you. And both
Right.
of those are valuable, but
Right.
even more powerful to have been through it and to be an example of someone who can yes, you can get through it. I did it. If I can do it, you can do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I'm just a nobody. If God'll do it for me, I'm sure he'll do it for you too. So, but that's a lot of the model of Celebrate Recovery is recovering yourself and then turning back and reaching back for the person behind you. And
Uh,
that in recovery, it's really, it takes someone that's been through that situation. So we pair people up with sponsors. We look for people that have the same gender and then similar issues, whether it's addiction or codependency or sexual trauma or grief or whatever it may be.
mm,
We pair them with somebody who's been through a similar thing. And I think that's the beauty. We have these open share groups. And you just get, everybody goes around the room and you just get a couple of minutes to share. And we don't try to fix you. We don't judge you. We just say thanks for sharing. And I think the beauty in that is that you have these Me Too moments. I think the enemy wants us to believe that we're the only one that struggles like we do.
yes.
And when you get in these rooms and you hear other people share, you're like, you realize you're not alone and that it's not an isolated issue. It's not just that there's something wrong with you, that it's a universal, a all kinds of people struggling with the very same issues. So,
Absolutely. Well, I would take that one step further. I think absolutely every person on this earth has something they are addicted to, recovering from. What was the three
absolutely.
things you said? You said them so quickly. They were so great. Hearts, habits, and hang-ups.
Hurts, habits, and hang up.
Oh, I
Yes,
love that. Everyone's got one of those.
absolutely.
That's something we're dealing with and working through. And there's power. There's so much power. I think this is part of the reason God suggests or necessarily commands really us to confess our sins to somebody, to
Mhm.
confess our sin. There's something really powerful about saying it out loud.
Absolutely.
I think it helps us own it in a
Mm.
way that you can't just do that inside your head. I'm one of those, I think out loud. Like even when I'm trying to do something with my business or just sort through something, I find myself talking to myself and my son laughs at me. But there's
Right.
something,
Me too.
yeah, there's something just powerful about hearing it said out loud. And as you said, to have the companionship of other people who are walking a similar journey.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a part of that process as well. The fourth step is doing an inventory. And we go through, we try to keep it very balanced. You go through the things that have hurt you. You've gone through, you list the good things that have helped to make you who you are.
Mhm.
And you go through and you systematically look at that and you admit your failings or your sins to your sponsor. And then you look at the sins that have been done against you and you seek to forgive and you seek to get forgiveness.
Mm.
You ask God and then you attempt to make amends the best way that you can. And it's so freeing. I mean, there's so much of that that we carry around. If you don't formally sit down and process it, I was busy with the kids, and all that. So my feelings, I would just sort of stuff down. And some of that was appropriate because I was mom. And in that moment, I needed to be the person that they needed me to be. But I had been stuffing, 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 and that was never getting processed. And so it just built up. And so when I was able to sit down and look at all of that and really go through that, talk about that, write it out seeing it written out on paper, and just communicating that, there's so much freedom in that. I
Mm,
mean, you don't even realize it. Every year I lead group of ladies through 12 step. And when they come in, there's always this dark cloud
mm,
over them. And it's so funny throughout the year to see that cloud lift. And then at graduation night, we're all just bouncing around and the way, I mean, they're just glowing. The change in people over the course of those 9 months is just unbelievable because they've done that work, and it just never fails. I tell people, "Don't give up before you get your miracle." I've never had anybody get to the end and not get their miracle. So it's good work. It's good work, and it's freeing, and it helps you to be has helped me anyway, and I think helped most of the other women I've worked with. It helps them be the person that God made them to be because they're not weighed down with the enemy's condemnation and bitterness and the things like that that he would have us hold on to. So,
yeah, right. So true. And the lies, right? Just the blatant lies that the enemy wants to fill our head with.
oh, absolutely.
I like that you used the word, Julie, the word work. It is a
Yes.
lot of work. It does take work. It takes a little bit of bravery and courage. But I also like the fact that you were admitting that you were stuffing those emotions and thoughts down, in the process of being a mom throughout those years, because I think so many people, so many of us do that. And you
Yes.
either address it, you either be willing to work and
Mhm.
address it, or it
Right.
continues festering kind of underneath the surface. And at some point, it's going to explode and it's
Right.
going to affect your physical health. It's going to affect your mental health, or it's going to affect, like we were talking about before, about heartbreak and destruction of the family. Those
Mhm.
kinds of hurts and hangups and habits hurt our families if we don't take the time that we need to address them and do the hard work, face it, and get past it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. And we wind up passing that on to the next generation. And, I tell people all the time, the enemy's coming for your kids. You can't protect them enough. I tried. The enemy's coming for them. But the more work that you do for yourself, I just did a teaching where I talked about the Israelites when they got ready to go into the promised land. And I'm sure that they thought that they had, arrived, but it was
Mm,
really that they were ready for battle. But the battles that they didn't fight, the battles that they backed down from or didn't obey God with, we're still feeling the consequences of that in the news today, all this years later. So the battles we don't fight for ourselves, we wind up passing on to the next generation. And it's not that they won't have their own battles, but if we come home and they see us, drink a bottle of wine or drink a couple of beers at the end of the day, that's the low hanging fruit for the enemy. He doesn't have to work so hard to convince them that
mhm.
that's normal because they've grown up with it. And I'm not judging anybody that, or whatever, but it's the low hanging fruit for our children. The battles we don't fight will be the low hanging fruit for our children.
Yeah, that's so true. Right. I was just actually in a coaching session recently. I was talking to this gentleman about his self talk was so toxic to himself because he was replaying the way his parents spoke to him. And it wasn't what they said, even as much
Mhm.
as it was the tone. You know how much tone matters when you're speaking to our kids.
Oh, right.
And so, yes, even in just if you are broken and you are, and we all are, let's just acknowledge that. Doesn't matter what we're dealing with, if it's a food addiction, a drug addiction, an alcohol addiction, a love addiction, a work addiction. There's a lot of things we can put that label on. But if you're dealing with your own addictions and you haven't dealt with it, and that's causing you to lash out to your kids, they're going to
Right.
hear that and their future self-talk is going to be shaded by that too. So your point is so important, Julie, that we really do need to take the time to fix ourselves and that investment is helping our family.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we get a lot of young people that come in, and I'm sort of envious of them that they're doing this work so early while their kids are young. Because my kids were, getting into adulthood, and I trust that God was at work and He was a part of the story. But I regret not having done this work earlier, where, maybe I wouldn't have made some of the mistakes I did make. And so, um, I think the sooner we can get onto these things, the better it is for our families.
Definitely. Yeah. What is the phrase? The best time to fix those things was yesterday. The
Right.
second best time is today.
Right. Right.
So you might as well
Absolutely.
dive into it.
Right.
I know that you have taught this topic to so many people with being a sponsor, first of all, but also with training sponsors for how
Mhm.
to be a good sponsor for those people who are walking this path. Can you
Right.
help my listeners understand, like, what? I don't know if you want to list off all 12. We can even put those in the show notes or something if you want to, but can you help my listeners kind of understand what that structure of that 12-step program through Celebrate Recovery looks like? Because I think we're familiar, at least some of us have heard about Alcoholics Anonymous, but how is that similar or how does that vary with Celebrate Recovery?
So the 12 steps are the same
Okay.
as AA, NA. The 12 steps are the same, regardless of the recovery program. Celebrate Recovery combines scripture. Jesus Christ is our higher power in a lot of the secular recoveries. And I'm not knocking them, they help a lot of people. They're great. But in a lot of those programs, they do not allow you to speak of Jesus.
Hmm.
And you can say God, but, they get a little antsy if you start talking about Jesus. And so the founder of Celebrate Recovery had been in AA and had had this issue. It was founded at Rick Warren's church. You remember the Purpose Driven Life?
Yes.
And so he went to Rick Warren and said, "Hey, I think it was 18 pages that he had written where, God gave him this vision for Celebrate Recovery." And Rick told him, "This is great, get to work." And so we just combined scripture instead of like AA has the big book, we have the Bible. And
Mm.
for every step, we pair it with a scripture. We can show you where this is biblically,
Hmm.
um, biblically in line. But I don't, to be honest with you, I don't have the steps memorized
That's
as
okay.
many times as
That's
I have
okay.
said. I say them every Friday night, but I don't have them memorized.
That's
But
okay.
the first three steps can be paraphrased. I can't, he can, I think I'll let him.
Oh.
So the first step is stepping out of denial, admitting that you have made a mess of your life. You cannot do it without him
Mm.
and that you need help. And the second step is acknowledging that he has the power to help you do that.
Mm.
And then the third step is if for people that don't already have a relationship with him, inviting him in. Or if you do have a relationship, saying, okay, like I'm really turning this over to you now.
Yeah.
And so once you get into that, then the rubber sort of meets the road, and you do the fourth step, which is an inventory. With the fifth step, and and you do need a sponsor and an accountability partners to do this. I don't recommend doing this work alone. But the fourth step is doing that exhaustive inventory, looking at your hurts, where you've been hurt, where you've hurt others, and going through that. The fifth step is sharing that with your sponsor, and then you begin to you ask God to remove your defects of character, and you become willing to make amends, and then you actually make amends, except when to do so would harm yourself or others. And so, um, and then after that, it becomes a daily thing. You do a
Mm.
daily inventory at the end of the day. Is there anywhere that have I been hurt and not addressed it, or have I hurt someone else and not addressed it? And looking at what you did great, what you did wrong, and going into the next day, what do you need to do to make amends for anything where
Mm.
you made a misstep? So it becomes step 10, 11, and 12 are kind of continuous. I tell people the 4 through 9 is sort of wiping the chalkboard clean, wiping all that past off. 10, 11 is really just maintaining it,
Yeah.
keeping it day to day, keeping it from adding back up. And
Okay.
so, and then the 12th step is turning around and helping somebody else. So passing it
Mm.
on to the next person that needs it.
Well, my beautiful friend, you were wrong because you do know all of the 12 steps. You got them all down.
Not my memory. That is my paraphrase. Sort of
That's
the
yeah.
gospel according to Julie.
Well, It's not important to remember the words exactly. It's important to remember the sentiment of those words, and you got that
Right.
down. So, one of the things that's so vivid to me that stood out when you were talking about that is when you bring certain things to focus or you bring it to your attention, you start being more aware of it. I was just speaking about this the other day about how if you are looking for negativity, you will find it.
Oh,
If
yes,
you're looking for
absolutely.
positivity, also, you will find it. So I
Right,
love that the 12-step program really brings to the surface an awareness of where I am being hurt or where I'm hurting others. And so
right.
as we awaken that part of our brain to be more alert to those kinds of pain givers, pain takers, we can
Mhm.
become a better advocate for ourselves and for those that we love.
Right.
And we can really take our power back. We can take our future back and
Mhm.
carve our future into, like what you said earlier so well, really the plan that God has for us instead of living reactively to something, a misstep that we took earlier in life.
Right. Well, and a lot of what I do as a sponsor is just give women the permission to feel the way that they feel and
Mm,
tell them you're not crazy for feeling that way. And
mhm,
then help them come up with a way to, in a godly way, if they need to talk to someone or, whatever they need to do to properly express that emotion. Maybe it's just, they need to share with a sponsor and sort of process it, or maybe they need to figure out how to go talk to someone so we can role play that and kind of come up with the words to help them go to the other person or that sort of thing. But so much of what I do is just give women the permission to feel the way that they feel. It's um, with codependency, and a lot of people don't know what codependency really is, but it's when you put others above yourself, when you don't have proper boundaries, when that sort of thing. But when you start to work on that, as Christians, we're taught to be selfless. Other people first, we're last, that sort of thing. And then as mothers, we're taught our children are first. We give everything to our children. Then when we get into situations when they're adults and like they're maybe an addiction or something like that, it's like abort, abort, tough love, and like what does that look like? And so untangling that and saying, okay, it's okay for me to feel the way I feel. I'm allowed to share that. I'm allowed to ask for my needs to be met. Or if somebody's hurting me, it's okay to say, I need you not to do this anymore. And I think a lot of times we just have so much going against us where we want to believe when we're hurt that we're overreacting, that it's in our mind, that we need to not rock the boat. And some of that is okay, but if you, if you don't do it correctly, you can start a war within yourself, and so there might be peace in the relationship, but you're no longer at peace, and the peace inside you is no longer there, and that will catch up with you at a certain point.
that's very true. And there's so many people who have that peacekeeper mentality, that peacekeeper emotion. And so I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people.
Right, right. So if you're not at peace too, then the peace is not really being kept. It's just being swept under the rug. So,
Right. Which, again, like we said earlier, eventually is going to erupt. It's going to erupt
right,
in your physical health. It's going to erupt in your emotional health. But
right, absolutely.
I've always found it really interesting that for human beings, absolutely, I think absolutely everything we do has to be learned. And
Mhm,
the thing that I find interesting is how willing we are to spend thousands and thousands of dollars going to school
mhm,
and learning a skill or learning a trade.
right,
But when it comes to learning how to handle our emotions or our responses or developing healthy boundaries, we think, "Ah, I can't spend any money on doing that. I can't spend time and
right,
money on that." Well, we've got, what do they say? Something like we use 10% of our brain.
right,
There's a lot of real estate up there that isn't appropriately being used or
right.
using to its full potential. And we have to spend time and sometimes money to get a
Mhm.
counselor or a therapist or someone that can really guide us through how to leverage what we currently have learned or unlearn a few things and learn the right ways to leverage our
Right.
emotions. They're beautiful things. Emotions are beautiful, but
Absolutely.
like anything, it's really taking the beautiful emotions and learning how to manage them and how to keep them into balance. And
Right.
that's a learned skill, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I'm working on a book, and I just wrote a chapter where I was trying to differentiate between being Christ-like and being codependent, and I thought about the Supreme Court justice that had to define the difference between art and pornography, and
Mm,
he basically just came to the point where he said, "I know it when I see it." But, you know, codependency, like, it's Christ-like behavior is great. You're supposed to be selfless. You're supposed to put other people's needs above yourself, all the things that Jesus taught. Codependency is where the enemy has taken that and twisted and corrupted it
yeah.
into something that no longer glorifies God, but causes harm. And it's just like the difference between art and pornography. Christ-like behavior is amazing, but even Christ-like behavior can be twisted and corrupted into something that it was never meant to be. And so any behavior like shopping, gambling, anything, food, it's any of it can be used to distract us from God and his calling on our lives.
Yeah. So true. This is one
You
of the
know?
things, it's a nuance. And I think you were talking before about the church and how some people have church trauma. And it's really true. Some of the biggest sinners, quite frankly, are the church. Just because we're there doesn't mean we're any better than anybody. It just means we recognize we need somebody to help us. And so,
Right.
but I love what you said. Anytime the evil one, takes something that was intended for good and twists it. So the
Mhm.
intention of our heart is no longer to please God, but to please ourselves. But we
Mhm.
no longer want to create something beautiful out of art, but we want to take that art and selfishly satisfy fleshly desires. That's
Right.
that's when it's become twisted and it's no longer serving us, but it's corrupting us.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely.
I love what you're doing out there in the world, Julie.
And it's an honor. It's an honor for someone to trust you with their story and to trust you with their trauma and the things that they're going through. There's so many people, so many churches, I think, you know, um, we go to church and you put your mask on and you don't want to let anybody know what's going on with you. And when you have some serious real life problems, a lot of times if you tell people at church, you can be judged or you might receive well intentioned but ineffective advice, or sometimes not even well intentioned advice and judgment and that sort of thing. And I just want to um, normalize recovery and normalize this process. And I'm so fortunate my church grew out of a Celebrate Recovery ministry. But, the church that I had come from, it was very much the other way. And I was having issues with my kids, and I could not share and could not tell people what was going
Mm.
on with me because I was receiving judgment and all of that. Church needs to be a place where we can be real and where we can come alongside each other and support each other and be real with each other. Yeah. And I just want to normalize. I just want to normalize that as much as possible and get that hope out there as much as possible. My experience at one church helped get me to the point where I was when I walked in that Friday night. And
Mhm.
then my experience at a church where recovery was front and center has saved my life and turned it around. So we can make all the difference with our churches.
Yeah, we sure
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just having that safe space to be able to, like, that's why I'm here. I'm here to be vulnerable and to recover. And let's just acknowledge, like we were saying earlier, that no matter who's coming in with whatever kind of good looking face on or happy, bright, sunny, everything's all good, guarantee you
Right.
there's something in their life that isn't. So
Oh,
we gotta
absolutely.
hold each other gently and
Yeah.
love them for all that they are, the good,
Right.
the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between, right?
Right. And so many times we have no idea what people are, I'll have people tell me things and it'll just blow me away because they're so put together. I would never have thought they were dealing with something like that. And it's just a great reminder to always be kind and show grace um, and mercy and just give people the benefit of the doubt. Um, we have a saying in our church: hurt people." And save people, serve people, and, hurt people hurt people. So, um, if they're hurting you, it's probably because they've been hurt, and that doesn't make it okay for them to hurt you. But when you understand they're probably coming from a place of hurt, it makes it possible to be able to resolve that and work it out.
That's a really good point. Hurting people hurt people. Yeah. So sometimes their words are coming not from a personal attack perspective, but like you said, from a place of hurt.
Right. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you.
Oh, usually.
Nothing to do with you. You just happen to be the person in that place at that time, and here it comes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness.
It's-
Well, my friend, I love what you're doing. I love how you're pouring out to people in the world and giving people a fresh start and leveraging the beautiful and powerful power of God and Jesus Christ. Jesus is the only one that can restore completely
Absolutely.
a new heart and can transform a life like that. So I'm really excited that you're doing that for people out there in the world. If somebody wanted to learn more about Celebrate Recovery programs, could they reach out to you, or where would you suggest they look?
Well, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. Celebrate Recovery does have a website with a meeting finder, so you can go to their www.celebraterecovery.com and look to see if there are meetings close to you. Um, and there's also Recovery Alive. That is another program that sort of split away from Celebrate Recovery, but that's another great Christian recovery program I can recommend. And I think that their website is recoveryalive.com, and I'm sure they have similar resources. I write mostly for loved ones of addicted adults, and you're welcome to reach out to me. My website is www.alovelikehis.com. And then right now I'm doing a free holiday guide. It's a process I developed as I was going through with my sponsees each year. Before the holidays, I would sit down and sort of walk them through this process. And it works well for if you have an addicted loved one in your family, but it also works well if you just have a difficult relationship in your family. But just about being prepared, looking at, okay, what are some potential issues and setting goals for yourself, personal goals that you can control, setting boundaries, how you're going to enforce those boundaries, coming up with a plan, getting everybody on the same page. If there's an addicted loved one, making sure everybody's on the same page and know how you're going to handle if they show up high or if they get belligerent, or that sort of thing. But it's really just kind of looking at that and then setting personal goals that you can control. So like I said, even with just difficult situations, I started it when I first got married and my stepchildren were not particularly fond of me, and we would go to holidays and things. And I said, okay, I'm going to be kind no matter how they respond. And I'm not going to do anything to get in the way of my husband's relationship with them. That was my goal for myself. And I could control that. So if I went and I could, at the end of that night, I could say, I did those goals. It was a good night, whether it went real well or not. I could say it was a good night because I had done what I had set out to do. And so it just kind of evolved from there. And so I've got that freebie if anybody's interested in it. It's www.ilovelikehis.com/holiday guide if anybody's interested in that.
I will put that in our show notes for sure, Julie. I think that will be a wonderful help for people, especially as we start moving closer toward Thanksgiving and Christmas season when, truly those are when a lot of our triggers
Absolutely.
surface, whether it's relationship triggers or emotional or actual substance, lots of triggers around those holidays.
Oh,
So,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
So we'll put those in the
Absolutely.
show notes. And I love the idea of a goal that you have control over. That's the best kind of goal, is the one that you have control over, because you don't have control over how someone speaks to you, but you have control over how you respond. And
Absolutely.
that could be a win, even if you can't control how they respond to you. So I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to the big recovery serenity prayer,
Yeah.
serenity to accept the things you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Love that.
It's looking at what can I control, what can I not control, and how do I want to control what I can. So,
Exactly. No sense worrying about the rest of it. You
right,
can't control it. No sense spending your energy on it.
right, absolutely. I mean, it's just it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy, and it just makes you miserable. Trying to control something you can't. It's just an
Exactly.
exercise in frustration. Uh,
We had enough of that. We don't need any more.
I
So,
certainly don't need
okay.
any extra of that in my life.
Oh, good. So, I guess just to kind of wrap up, given everything that you've experienced and you've seen some really really low lows and you've seen some extreme, like you're talking about experiencing a miracle, right? So you've seen some
Right.
really great highs. Do you have an encouragement for someone out there who's somewhere in the middle or maybe just starting their journey or trying to decide if they want to start that journey? Do you have an encouragement for them?
Um, I would encourage just it's a step-by-step thing. Just take that first step and keep going. Don't give up. I tell my class every week, don't give up until you get your miracle. When we get to the fourth step, we get that hard work, we start losing people. I
Mm,
would hate to get to heaven and see that God had a miracle when I quit just before. So take that first step and don't give up until you found that miracle. And if you don't have a church or you don't feel comfortable at your church, find one that you do. There are people out there that will come alongside you and support you for who you are. And just keep looking for that and just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep your eyes on God. If we can keep our eyes on God. Don't project too far into the future and don't hold on too far to the past. But where am I at today? Is any of these things I'm worried about? None of that's happening today. And so just sort of grounding yourself and then trusting God with your future that even if those worst case scenarios in your head play out, that God will redeem that God is still at work in that. Where we are weak, He is strong. And so we don't have to get it all right because those places where we don't get it right, those places where we're weak, that's where He comes along and does His thing. That's the room for Him to work in our lives. And so don't be afraid of that and just trust that there is redemption coming. It may not be what you want it to look like, what you think you want it to look like at this point, but it is coming and it will be even better than what you could imagine when you let God write the story. The ending is always even better than what you could imagine. So, even in the worst case scenarios, He's at work.
love that. That is so good. That's like I'm going to just keep that, my friend Julie. I'm going to keep that little part of our recording and I'm going to play
Yeah.
that for myself over and over every day. So good. That's a beautiful answer. I trust that God is working on the victory before it reveals itself. I just trust that it's in process. And
Right.
what you had said, just don't give up before you get that miracle. It's like you're on the continuum. Just wait. It's just right there ahead of you. Just hold on.
Right. Right.
It's a really good visual.
Right. And just giving Him control. I know in my earlier days with my kids, I thought that I knew what God's will was.
Mm.
I thought that I knew what He would want for them. And so I thought, well, if I could do this or I could do that, or, I could control that outcome to get what I thought His will would be. Problem was, His will looked an awful lot like mine. So,
Mm.
and that was probably not a good thing. I, I wanted my daughter sober. He wanted her redeemed. He wanted her saved. I wanted her happy. He wanted her joyful. There were the things that I wanted were very short-sighted. They were in the moment. I just fix this problem, and then everything will be okay. But what he was really doing was working in the problems to create the strengths and the faith and the things that she was going to need to deal with her own life. My faith was not going to save her, no matter how hard I tried. My faith was not going to save her. But by allowing God to take over and allowing God to work in it without me trying to manipulate or enable or keep her out of jail or, whatever that was, um, just allowing God to do what He was going to do, put the things in place for her to be the amazing woman that she is now. And
Mm.
if I had just fixed all her problems, she may not have those problems anymore, but she would not be the woman that she is now. And I'm so proud of her. She's an amazing mom.
Mm.
Love my grandchildren. They are just the light of my life.
Mm.
My biggest blessing.
God's amazing.
Absolutely, He is.
He is amazing. Yeah. Well, I just loved having you on the show. I really did. I love your story. I love what you shared and how you shared it. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for all you're doing for both our listeners as well as for the people that you serve.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
Julie is such a powerful force for good and the sweetest soul you might ever get to know. I have 8 powerful takeaways for you today. Number 1, be willing to try again. We humans have the unique ability to give up. Nowhere else in the animal kingdom does creation entertain the idea of giving up. But we humans have this tendency to say something like this to ourselves. I'll give them one last chance. Or I'll try one last time. Remember the first time Julie went to Celebrate Recovery Church? She went and left and didn't think they had anything for her. But what if she had just left it at that? Pause for a moment and just consider, what would have happened if she had given up? Her life would have been over. The lives of her 10 kids would be devastated. And all the lives that she's poured into since that Friday night would have missed her kind and powerful impact. But she did go back and received her miracle, one of them, which launched her recovery journey and changed her life and all the lives in her present and future world. Don't give up, my friend. Wait for your miracle, which is just up and around the corner. God has you. You're not alone, and you will get past this. And the beauty that awaits you on the other side is something you might not even be able to imagine right now. But you can do this. Remember, with God, all things are possible. And just like Julie said, of all the many people she's worked with, she's never had someone not get their miracle. Number 2, you are not alone. It takes time, but when you gently and slowly and maybe bravely feel able to step out of the dark into the light and start sharing your story, you're gonna see that you're not alone. The enemy wants us to feel isolated and alone, as if we are stranded on our own little island of misery. But the truth is, we all have our junk. Everyone, myself included. No matter how much you think, wow, look at her, she's got it all going on. Well, I guarantee you, she is dealing with something. No one's immune from it. So if you have things going on, that doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It just is a universal truth of human nature. We are all prone to fail, we all make mistakes, and most people have some kind of addiction to something. You are not alone. Number 3, deal and heal with your hurts, hangups, and habits. You either address it and be willing to work through it until you heal, or it will continue to fester underneath the surface. And at some point, it's going to explode. And that explosion will affect you, your marriage, your kids, and often it'll affect your physical health as well. Our hurts, hangups, and habits hurt those around us unless we deal with them and learn how to find peace with the past and turn our pain into purpose to help other people. If you don't deal and heal your hurts, hangups, or habits, you will most likely pass it on to the next generation, either your kids or those younger people around you in your circle of influence. So let the damage stop with you. As Julie so brilliantly puts it, the battles we don't fight for ourselves become the low-hanging fruit that evil will use to pull down those behind us. So don't leave your mess for someone else to clean up. Deal with it, overcome it, work through it so you don't pass it on. Number 4, the 12 steps. Julie summarized the 12 steps in her own words, and I like how she put it. The first 3 steps, she says, can be summarized as, I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. Steps 4 through 9 is the opportunity to wipe the slate clean and let go of the past. Steps 10 and 11 are focused more about how to maintain this newfound joy and peace, really the strategies for how to stay healed. And then number 12 is all about taking the newly empowered you and helping someone else who is coming right behind you. That's the part where you get to turn your pain into purpose. Number 5, are you really a peacekeeper? If you're one of those who doesn't want to rock the boat, you don't want to face or address conflict, you just prefer to kind of stuff down the emotions and the hurt of discord swirling around you, yeah, there might be some superficial peace in the relationship or in the family gathering at the moment, but you're no longer at peace with yourself. And if you're honest with yourself, you will realize that just below the surface, there is a ton of angst just bubbling around in your family as well. And it's not going to take much to ignite an explosion with all of that going on. So rather than experience that kind of torment month after month, year after year, holiday after holiday, how much better to just gently, lovingly, and respectfully address it, work through it, and find true and lasting peace. It will be one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself and those you love. Number 6, crossing the line. the paradox of nuance. In this crazy world, we often face this strange paradox of nuance, something that sounds really subtle, but when you cross the line has an enormous impact. The enemy, evil, Satan, whatever you want to call it, is really good at this. From the first days in the Garden of Eden to your present day experience, evil is really good at taking something that was intended to be beautiful, helpful, kind, or innocent, and twisting it into something that corrupts, something that no longer glorifies God, but instead causes harm. I think I could do an entire podcast on this topic, and maybe I will. But think about it. It's the nuance where you cross the line from good to evil, and where the intention of your heart is no longer to please God, but to please yourself. When we no longer want to create something beautiful, but we want to take that thing and selfishly satisfy our fleshly desires. So, for example, the art crosses the line and becomes pornography. Food becomes gluttony. One drink eventually turns into alcoholism. A loving dependence on someone turns into an exploited codependence. Even Christ-like behavior can become prideful, no longer about God, but more about the validation or the kudos we can get from people around us. Balance in this life is really important, and when we let things get out of balance, we slip across the line. And those same experiences which brought joy become destructive. I think that's why it's so easy for us to slip into these behaviors. We have to stay alert, monitor our hurts, our hang-ups and habits, and consider regular resets to be sure we don't slip into the destructive behavior. And when we find that we have gone there, we gotta get help. Get help and pull yourself back, with God's help, into the side of peace. There is no shame in that, my friend. Get help. You wouldn't move a 2-ton load of bricks without the tools or the help that you need. So why not get help for this thing that's holding you back from the life God has for you? Number 7, hurting people hurt other people. If you're on the receiving end of a harsh word, a knee-jerk reaction, or some other kind of hot molten lava that's spewed all over you, let me gently remind you that in those cases, it usually has nothing to do with you. You just, unfortunately, happen to be in the presence of that person at the place and the time when that person's volcano in front of you erupted. You didn't cause it. You are just close enough to the eruption to receive the hot lava. So I know it's hard, but let it go. Walk away, pray for them, give them a little time to calm down, and then circle back and find out what's going on. Number 8, life is even better than what you could possibly imagine when you let God write the story. Julie thought she knew what God's will was and what God wanted for her children. The problem was, as Julie so humbly admits, in her mind, God's will looked an awful lot like her will. She wanted her daughter sober. God wanted her daughter redeemed. Julie wanted her daughter to be happy. God wanted her to have his joy. And if Julie had succeeded in getting her will, her daughter wouldn't have been the amazing woman she is today. If Julie had just gone and fixed all of her daughter's problems, while the problems would be gone, her daughter wouldn't be that amazing woman that makes Julie so very proud. It takes humility, patience, and a huge dependency on God. And that is exactly where God wants us, leaning on him and trusting his plan for our eternal lives, not just the lives we have here on earth. Thank you for joining me today. Please note that Julie is sharing her free holiday guide right here with all of our listeners. So look for the link in the show notes for that free holiday guide. And be encouraged today, my friends. If you're fighting through a hurt, hang-up, or habit today, let me just remind you of Romans 5, 3-5. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. Be encouraged and know that you will get through this. Hold on for your miracle, my friend. It's coming. Please share this episode. You just never know what encouragement might be in this conversation that someone else needs to hear. Pass it along, share it, like it, and subscribe. Let's flood the world with more encouragement. Until next time, my friends, stay encouraged, be inspired, and we'll see you next time right here at the Sunshine Cafe.